Welcome, Matt. Thank you very much for being here with us and giving us your time to share your experiences. As you all know from the advert and the Zoom clip that we put out, Matt has stage 4 bowel cancer, and he's come today to share his experiences and how he's found positivity. In his journey and how he's working through it all. You've just gone through surgery, haven't you? And
Yep.
came home Christmas Day.
Yeah, made it home, 4 o'clock, Christmas Day. Yeah.
That's crazy. So I'll hand over to you, Matt. And then if anyone's got any questions, if you put your hand up or you just put in the box thumbs up, we can come round to you at a suitable time and you can ask any questions.
Cool.
Cheers.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Thanks for having me. What I tend to do is sort of set the scene kind of thing, just so you know, sort of my, I guess, cancer background, for want of a better word. But then really, hopefully, then focus upon, I guess, my specific things that I've learned from everything. That hopefully there might be some things that you all want to ask or that you hear and think, actually, that's something that we can action or it's useful to know about. Because I guess starting at the beginning, for me, it was an emergency situation. It was for many people in 2020, everyone was all about COVID. But for me, unbeknownst to me, my big C wasn't going to be COVID, it was going to be cancer. And I got two kids, and I think it was around September of 2020, just during one of those blips where we were allowed to meet a few people. I did a little barbecue for my then 2-year-old son's birthday, and over after that barbecue, for a couple of weeks, I started getting these shots of pain to my stomach, to my tummy. And I just joked to people that I work with. I think I'd not done a very good job on this on the barbecue or something like that. It was a dodgy sausage. In hindsight, it wasn't. It was a lot more serious than that. But that was the only ever sign that I had before I ended up at rushed. Well, not rushed actually. I was down with my. I'd given my wife the weekend off. I'd gone down to where my folks live down in Bexhill. I took my two kids, Emma and Alex, 2 and 4 at the time, down that weekend. And during that weekend, I wasn't particularly helpful as a dad because I was in a lot of pain. And I went to their local hospital, which wasn't great. And they made me feel like I was wasting their time. They told me to just go home, and that there were seriously ill people in here. And all they did was give me an X-ray. What I know now, because I've learnt a lot of science and stuff since then, is that an X-ray doesn't tell you everything. There's lots of other scans, and I've had them all since then. But yeah, they sent me home with some Bascopan, and just the feeling of time wasting. The next day, the Sunday, it was getting worse and worse, and mum being mum just wants to feed me. And what we didn't know is that ain't happening. I was completely, in fact, that made it a lot worse. So I phoned my wife and said, I think you need to come down. She got the train. Uh, we drove um, we drove home. At the time, we managed to get a childminder, drop the kids off, and rush straight to the local hospital. Glad we did. Glad we made that effort, because by being near home, you know when it's serious when they after A&E and stuff like that. And I got given a CT scan. I got an NG tube up my. They started draining things out, and then I think it was the next day, pretty quickly actually. It's serious when you're in a bed and you see like a little group of people having a chat. Then they look over to you, and then they all come over all in one. And one of them's got like the Macmillan lanyard. And I, like Justin, do do a bit of creative work. So you kind of identify logos and stuff, and you go, hang on. And they'd said, yep, we found something as a big obstruction in your large intestine. It might not be anything, but it could be cancer. And then you suddenly have that impact of like the power of words, because a word like that is not something you expect to hear when you're 39. Really, it wasn't something that it wasn't a part of Sarah or my or the kids' world at all. It was something that happens to one of my parents' friends or something like that. But they operated the next day, big old operation, cut me open, took out a third of my large intestine, replumbed me, and they were quite confident. They said, yeah, I think we've, I remember meeting the surgeon afterwards and feel like we've got everything, all that kind of sort of stuff. But we'll do probably do some mop up chemo and all that kind of thing. Takes a while to recover from emergency surgery, and what I didn't know is during that time, it's an opportunity for cancer to start finding its way, and it did. And in fact, the scan that later happened showed that it spread to my liver, and that changed tactics. And they also, I've learned a lot of science, since then. My biology A level has been reasonably helpful, and I have a mutation which is called BRAF V600E, which is the same as Dame Deborah James had, which is a very fast growing form, and it's more common in younger people with bowel cancer, it seems. So I remember a phone call and they said, we were going to give you this range of chemo. We're now going to give you this range of chemo, which is like the platinum stuff. It was a big old combination called folfoxyri, where it was like a load of drugs were given to me for 6 months. And I remember at that time, because of all the other COVID stuff, meeting in weirdly like a private hospital with some person that basically showed me a form, and it goes, so there's this one which says palliative and this is one that says curative, and because it looks like it's just in a part of your liver, we're going to tick the curative option. I said, yeah, let's go for that. Let's tick that one option. But they were quite confident we're going to attack it, and then we're going to try and then do what's called they're basically, your liver is the only organ that can actually be chopped apart and regrow. So they were going to ablate it to, well, they were going to do a two-stage operation. So the two-stage operation, after 6 months of pretty intensive chemotherapy, where I've still got some side effects to that original chemo, was all pretty positive. They were going to go in to my liver. They cut off the blood supply to the large bit of the liver, which makes the smaller bit grow. And then they were going to chop the rest of the liver out and then grow it all back. And then we're kind of done. That was the plan. Didn't quite work out. And they, that first stage, they woke me up because it was a fairly straightforward go in. And by lunchtime, I'm woken up, and the surgeon sort of says, yeah, didn't quite work out when they went in. Even though it was keyhole, they found things were a lot more extensive. And actually that it was also in my peritoneum, which is like a skin barrier between your lungs and large intestine. I hope all this detail is okay, but I'm quite open with it all now. And so I said, yeah, we I chopped out bits that I could see, but unfortunately, it's going to change tactics a bit. We weren't able to do. So that was a bit rubbish. Go home, and then go, I wonder what the new tactics are. And then on my 40th birthday, so 14th of April 2021, I get a phone call at 11 o'clock from the oncologist, and they go, oh, confirm your birthday. It's like, oh, it's today, isn't it? It's like, yeah. So you've got some news of what the tactics are, and they're like, well, we're going to try you on these new drugs. And they were new; they'd only just been approved November of the year before, and they weren't wrong with what they said to me, that that day, because I now appreciate that when an oncologist speaks to you, they give you the data based upon the statistics that they have, and statistics aren't up to date. Statistics are based upon data that they've gathered over the many years. And these drugs, they may have were only through trials, they weren't a big sample. You also realize that the majority of people they're treating are of a lot of an older age. And so it's like, okay, all right, so what are these drugs like and what are they going to do? So it is, they tend to help for a bit. And I was like, okay, what are we talking about? It's like maybe 6 months. I was like, and then what? And there's like, that's what you got 6 months to live. So at that point, uh, that kind of ruined my 40th birthday. Um, and you go through so many feelings. Like I remember doing, I think it was in business or something, where you do like the change curve, where you like go through stages of like denial and angry and then acceptance and then all this kind of stuff. And a lot of that happened. On that day, I remember my wife sort of collapsed on the floor and her watch went off to say, "Do we need to phone an ambulance?" Because she'd sort of had, I remember shouting, the kids weren't in, they were away at that day. And I remember just shouting no quite loudly. And then thinking, right, change of day, we'll go see my folks and I'll gather my sisters and we'll have a bit of a chat on the beach and all this stuff. But then we start over a few days to build up a plan and actually look at data and start becoming, uh, what's the facts on these side of things. So that's where we got to. But as everyone here will notice, I'm still here. And actually, I have my response to those drugs is unusual, and the team that I work with now, and I've gone through, like, one of the oncologists has retired in the period of time that I'm still been on the same drugs. My new oncologist is probably a little bit more open to things. I remember over those first few months, there are certain things, and when I mean months, of like months after that happened, there were certain things that Sarah and I did that now we're truly thankful that we did. And on reflection, I can kind of label them and list them, but we never really sort of said, "Oh, we're going to do a life audit." But actually, in a way, we did do that. We did that on walks, on drives, on conversations. We talked about selling up and getting a camper van, doing all the great. Well, partly we were still in lockdown, but the other side of things was also like, actually, when you start going through things, you start really considering the priorities. What are the family going to need if this happens, if this doesn't happen? What do the kids need? They need the friendships they're already building up in their school. We've got community and friends and not so much family where we are, but actually we've got a group and a place here that we like. So we thought about all that kind of mad stuff, and in the end, it was more bucket and spade list than bucket list, and it continues to be that kind of approach to things. But it was also, for me, the importance of being an advocate for yourself. The NHS or any health system doesn't lack continuity. It lacks continuity. There are lots of different departments. There's lots of different. In theory, you're allowed to have second and third opinions, but this first oncologist, and he was okay, but and very experienced, but in those first few months after we've been said these new drugs, they're going to work for a bit, but not for long. We had a meeting with them where my Macmillan colorectal specialist nurse was also present. She's become a key person for me. And not every trust have them, and not every cancer has a person specialist, but I'm so lucky that I do have that person because I've got her email address. I can contact her and she coordinates stuff because we've got lives. This isn't my focus in life at all. And in fact, on our fridge, we've taken the post-it notes down. But in those early days, in the darker days of 2021, we wrote up post-it notes that were like, cancer doesn't define me, you know. And seeing that does really help, but also realizing how the system works. And we took in a voice recorder. We sat in and met this guy, and Sarah had done a big old spreadsheet of all the other options and all the other people and the specialist surgeon up at Imperial College that does radical surgery. And we didn't let the guy leave. You know, I mean, they want 10 minutes with you because they're busy. And I respect these people, but I also know that you have to tell your story. You have to be noisy. You have to be polite, but a bit sort of challenging of, no, no, you experiment on me. You know, no, don't treat me like the majority of your other patients. And I've got full respect for the majority of people that I see at cancer treatment every other Friday. Well, less true now, but in those early days, I remember going in there and people going, "Oh, you're a bit young for this," you know. And unfortunately, now there is more of a younger mix of adults. But they, my experience with the oncologists that I had been meeting were their treatment was almost more geared to people that are retired, that haven't got other things and other priorities in life. And one of the things I wanted to talk more about with you guys was actually that perspective of what a younger, I don't know if I classify myself quite as a young adult, but actually I think there's an entirely different way, a more holistic way that a young or younger adult needs to be treated when cancer affects their family. Because actually we have so many other things that matter, so many other ways to manage things. Because I coordinate cancer treatment and blood tests around meetings and work and the family and kids. And one of the things that my wife and I discussed was, well, shall we get rid of the business that I run? So I set up a bit, took over a business in 2010. I'm lucky that I enjoy the majority of what I do as a business, and I identified that it was a motivator. And if you eliminate in your life any purpose other than your health, that's actually not going to help your health, because to overcome fatigue after chemo, you need to rest a bit, but you also need to get out and walk, or in Simon's case, go for a run, or whatever it is. You know, you also benefit from the fact that the kids need you, because we were totally upfront with any questions that our children asked when they were young and still now. And Emma, who's now 8, has a bigger understanding than she did 4 years back. But at any point when they ask stuff, we would often take a bit of a breath and explain, maybe sometimes in more detail than they want to, because then they go, "Oh, can I have a snack?" We would add more weight to the answers that we would gave them than they sometimes needed. But we never didn't answer their question. I think that, and I think that's something that I feel that was the right call and continues to be the right call when speaking and communicating with your children, is to not just say, "Oh, you wouldn't understand." It is to give them the honest truth and answer their questions simply, but truthfully, to not lie. But even on that side of things, there were things that I put off and I wish I'd done earlier. So for us, associated with the cancer centre that I go to, there's a charity that I saw, they were there, and they offered complementary therapies and all that kind of stuff. And one time after treatment, I did have a foot massage thing, which was lovely, but there was so much more that they offered. And since then, I'm a moderator for stage 4 Bowel Cancer UK. I moderate as part of their group on Facebook. And there were things that when people would join and they would talk about, oh, I've just started on this treatment, and if it was a treatment I had experience of, I'd say, oh, things to think about. But often there were things that I was recommending that I actually realised I put off doing, and I kind of wish I'd done some of that stuff earlier. And one of them was counselling. It was also uh, uh, the children met a child counsellor associated with a charity, and they had a for their from their perspective, they just had an hour in a funky little shed chatting to someone. But what they didn't realise is that individual was sort of assessing how they were treating stuff. And then afterwards, we had a conversation with her, and she made it clear that they could visit her at any point, and when they have troubles and that kind of side of stuff. And it was helpful to know that that's still open for them at any point. But it was also something I think, oh, we should have done earlier, because actually I think at that time my son was just going through troubles at school, and we started thinking, oh, is it something to do with daddy? Is it something that, because thankfully this is long term and I'm heading towards, 5 years this September. I'm having my 48th cycle of the current treatment that I'm on this Friday. Each cycle for me is 4 weeks, so that's a long old period on the same drugs. I'm an odd case. The way they put it the other day was that I'm not following the traditional pathway, which is the polite way of saying normally people don't keep on going for as long as you do. But I think that's actually part of the fact is that because we're talking about a younger adult with a different response, and thankfully it's still fairly rare that this stuff happens for people of our younger age. But yeah, I wish I'd. There one thing there's a few things that I reflect upon. I wish I'd known about earlier. One was about financial support. That although we weren't, we're not on the sort of red line of income or anything like that, the reality is that maintaining and managing your health with going through cancer, going through long-term cancer, has impact. I lose a full day every fortnight. I lose a weekend. There's a lot of actual medical admin that consumes a huge amount of your time. And there's PIP, which is something that I'm now on. Whether you hear about it, hopefully they're going to keep around. Who knows what? But actually, I finally got round. I think this time last year to finally start registering an application for personal independence payment. I think it stands for, and that's something that I could have done. And actually, at that April time, when obviously it was like horrendous news, I would have got it straight away without filling in any forms. Um, it took 2.5 years of not doing something for me to then get someone from Citizens Advice to help me fill in a form, and then I got awarded something that's helped me with a bit of extra cash, and also provided us with a electric car, which takes me to treatment center every couple of weeks and all this kind of side of stuff. So initially, I felt like it wasn't something that I warranted or deserved. But then some of the people on the forum that I mentioned for bowel cancer, they kind of chirped up because, yeah, but many of us won't ever get that, pension that everyone else is in theory promised. And it's a bit harsh, but cancer patients can kind of tend to cut the crap, and they do talk honestly about these things, and that's quite refreshing actually. Sometimes you go, so actually it's just really you're getting a pension, you're just getting income at the point that you could benefit from it, because you may not be someone that draws a government or whatever pension. So I was like, okay, yeah, fair enough. It's a pretty crap situation to be in. You know, take the support that is available. Because I, like some people, were those, when I was looking for jobs, I never got round to applying for job seekers allowance and stuff like that. But actually, take the stuff, the stuff that the benefits that you are have access to. Absolutely do them, and but also get someone to fill in the form to guide you through the process, because I would not have got what I got if I just written it on my own, because the citizens advice person knew how to fill in the form, to be frank, because my optimism really helps on the approach to all the stuff that's been thrown at me in the last few years. But they don't reward you for optimism. You've got to write about your worst day and all that kind of side of stuff. So yeah, that's one of the things that I think for me, I the things that I didn't have, like insurance, unfortunately, that health and all those kind of things. You can't retrospectively get all that kind of side of things because pre-existing stuff. But there are uh, certain sort of income perspective-y things that I wish I'd done a little bit earlier. And also, actually, I myself got counselling 12 sessions summer of last year and probably should have done it earlier. It was at a time where everything had been going on for a long time, which is great, but also sometimes your motivation for, I guess the way I'd put it is that I think it was one of the books I read was that as soon as someone tells you that you've got a health changing as soon as you've told you've got cancer, you've got serious health incident, you leave the normal train track of life. And I don't ever think you get back on that train track of life. And actually, some of that gives you perspective that I wish the normal people had. The mates that I meet, that we made friends at NCT, that we'll have a chat and they're working their arse off for a 10-year future. I kind of want to grab them occasionally and shake them and say, yeah, but live for now as well. Live for now, enjoy the journey, because you don't know how long your life journey. There are so many amazing people that have gone through terrible situations, and I think most of them don't tell their story for sympathy or for wow, they're heroic. I think most of them just wish everyone had that perspective without shit having happened to them, for want of better words. And I think that for me is that train track thing. The reality is that for young adults, you that are doing well living with cancer, your train's going on for longer. And what that does then mean is actually the track gets a bit closer to normal life. So you still have to then go, yeah, I am going to have to pay the mortgage. I'm going to have to fix the dishwasher and the guttering. I hit a point a few years into all of this stuff where I, that motivation for the day to day was gone. But the reality is we have to deal with the day to day as well. And I wasn't being a particularly great husband if I was just constantly just like not dealing with the boring practical side of life. It's great when you get to outperform all of the statistics, but it also means you have to deal with all the other practical side of things. And that's where I was like, I needed counseling to build up certain tools, certain resilience of actually how do you accept that you have to deal with the mundane? How do you get, for me, my motivation back to work? I getting back my mojo and passion for creativity and actually attracting new clients and paying the bills and all that kind of side of stuff, because it can't just be all beautiful present moments. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm so happy with the simple. I'm so happy just I one of the gifts of one of the cancer perks is that if my daughter wants to show me her dance routine, I'm watching it. If she wants to show me it again, I'll watch it again. It's the most important thing. It's and e and I think even unfortunately other people really close to me don't ever have that perspective. And like briefly when Justin and I met on Monday, Chris Hoy's recently written a book about his perspective and his journey. And he was on Chris Evans' show a few months back, and I listened to it and I share that podcast with my family and go listen because he's a great loudspeaker. And what I want them to say is that they listen to it and then they take something from it that they themselves are going to act upon. And unfortunately, what often happens is they listen to it and then they go, "Yeah, he's great, just like you, isn't he? Just he's near hero." It's like, no, 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 that's not the point. It's that the point is that when he talks about the way in which he's focused on priorities, on purpose, on actually how he spends his time, that's kind of how everyone should be spending their lives. You still have to deal with the practical, you still have to earn a living and pay the mortgage, but actually that perspective on living in the moment, I do have more freedom in I'm less stressed by the small stuff. I still have to deal with the small stuff, but actually if I do need to deal with an issue at work or a little bit, I'll just deal with it now because it's not, it's not as big as all the other stuff that an oncologist or someone else might uh, say is going to happen to you. And every fortnight when I go in and get hooked up and see all these people, and some of them are frankly looking terrible, and others are having jokes amongst themselves, and there's the nurse that's singing songs, and there's people now that are kind of like we have a bit of banter, or they haven't seen you. They go, "Oh, I haven't seen you for a while," and then I lift up my shirt and I say, "Well, I just had this done." You know, I part of that I kind of like, it's my afternoon off now. I put the seat into recline, and you know, there is a way. Everyone here and anyone else listening to this, you are far, far more durable and full of grit and full of more determined than you ever really realize until something like this. Because you can say, yeah, I can put up with loads of needles, I can make an afternoon full of random drugs fun. You part of it's an armor that you put on yourself. Part of it is that when I go in there and I go, "Oh yeah, yeah, Matt here," and I'll go for the window seat. I'm just going to grab a coffee, and part of it is actually a performance. But then part of your brain starts believing it as well, and it helps you deal with the rubbish of that day or the next day and stuff like that. Anyway, that's my start of my conversation. That I wandered around a bit, but I probably need a bit of guidance on. And was there other particular things I said I was going to cover and talk about?
You've actually covered everything in that. I think what particularly resonated with me was when you were saying about the statistics and what the hospital tell you and 6 months. And I thought actually that's a really good point that we are in a generation or in an era now where people are younger getting cancer, and we don't necessarily have the data to support what those drugs are actually doing for us. So it's absolutely awful that we are in this situation where people are younger getting cancer, but it seems to be a bit more promising that we are younger, we are fitter, and we are responding to the medication better than say an older person would be. So it'd be interesting to see what the statistics are like in 10, 15 years time. I found that quite interesting what you were saying there. It's though, and all the time the drugs are progressing and moving forward. So all the time you've got 6 months, a year, something else can be coming out. But when you're older, you don't necessarily have that time to, as a luxury. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was really interesting. But yeah, you covered everything. And then when you were saying about, your friends, you wish that they would take on board, and it's that thing, isn't it, of when you know. But if you don't know, you can't access that, that mindset.
Mm.
So, and it's so frustrating to see people, not making the most of everything, but they just don't know, do they? Has anyone else got any questions?
I just want to say, Matt, I, I hate using the word well done, but I mean, man, honestly, what you've gone through there, you and your family, and how you hold yourself now, and how you just shared, like, what was it, 4 years, 4 or 5 years, with that integrity and the way you've approached it and the way you've dealt with it and the way that you're living now is remarkable. And within, I want to first and foremost say welcome to Wolo in a weird way, because everything you're saying and standing for is just what we do. The
Absolutely.
families, the children, everything to the literally, it's everything you just spoke about there is what we're about.
Yeah.
And I feel really, really comfortable and in comfort listening to you. But at the same time, I felt incredibly sad, and it's just so harsh. It's so sad, for every, loads of people on this call now and people listening to this, unfortunately, that this is going on. And, yes, is it a lack of knowledge and things we never were taught at school or our upbringing, or is it the system doesn't want us to know, or what? Like, it's just so harsh. But it's remarkable that now we can get hold of the science, the data, just because the way the world is now. There is so much more information out there, and there's so many more people doing incredible things and things that are not the norm, but everything that, like you said earlier, how people live their life, live it with integrity. We're not
Mm.
guaranteed the next 10 years of our life, but how we live the next 10 years of our life is so important. But I just wanted to say thank you, because that was remarkable, mate. Thank you.
And also you said earlier, but was it too much information? But I think, again, we need to hear the information to be able to get to the other side, to get to the answers to the questions. It's sugarcoating sometimes doesn't always get us to where we need to be. So
No.
thank you, for sharing
And
everything.
I just,
Marcus.
yeah, I just wanted to jump on. I know exactly what you mean about Chris Hoy. You're giving people a vision of their future, and they're like, yeah, yeah, you're well done, and everything else. You're like, no. Do you want to be in the same fucking position as that we are? I'm giving you a ticket out of this. You've got chance to change now. And they're just like, yeah, I watched the podcast and everything else is fantastic, isn't it? And the frustration is sometimes you give these people information and they just go, yeah, well done. And then they'll just brush it off. It won't happen to me type thing. So, and I know the frustration you're going through when you push, like not push onto other people, but you try to explain that, you don't want to be in my position because it's a horrible place to be. So I'm giving you a ticket to step up now. And they're like, yeah, yeah, I'll do that in the future, do that in the future. And then all of a sudden they're like, Matt, that video you sent, I really wish I'd have listened to that, but I need your help now, sort of thing. It's like,
Mm. Yeah. Simon?
Oh yeah, thanks for sharing that, Matt. That's really interesting and inspiring to listen to. I could relate to various bits of it, but I just wondered how you balance. And presumably you have days where you find the positivity harder to come by. Like you talked a little bit about, some of the motivation for some of the small things or for work and stuff. But yeah, just I wonder how you balance that. Trying to stay positive and find the gifts or the good little bit good win small wins, little gems within within the experience of having cancer when things, either you're having treatment and you're feeling the side effects of that, or having to have operations, and or even just the sort of psychological thought of, being told that you've only got 6 months, or sort of not really knowing how long you've got. Yeah, I wonder how whether that can be a hard balance, or
I think it is a hard balance, and it is it varies depending on whether it's a day-to-day thing or even so I mentioned the surgery I had just before Christmas. So the first bit of uh, intrusion, other than lots of drugs, that I've had for 3 and a bit years. And things are different for this time because it wasn't in lockdown, and I was like, and I had to. I support that we had a number of different tactics because I did end up getting a second opinion that was open that I never activated until this last 6 months. And one of the things I didn't realize, just as an aside, is that as long as you get your oncologist or your GP to write a letter of second opinion, that stays open and you can use them, as a sounding board. You can get them to review scans, and in this case, they ended up taking on surgery that my main team wouldn't weren't able to offer. But they've actually been really coordinated. But to answer your main question about how you deal with the things, is like for that particular thing, I did it took me a right, okay, we're going ahead, and they had a biopsy, and we had to act pretty quick because I'd learned that there's a risk when you have biopsies. There's this thing called seeding, which cancer can wake up if you're going in, intruding it. And I've learned all this stuff over the years, and I learned up, sweated up about drugs and all this kind of stuff. So I knew we had to move pretty rapidly when we said we're going to move. But I had to get my big surgery pants on because initially I was like, I don't. I was. My scar had recovered really well. I was almost proud of my body. And there's a photo of me on the beach with the kids, and we're all like this, and I'm all like that. I was like, they're going to reopen my zipper again. But then I weirdly, before surgery, I met their plastic surgeon because he was a consultant that was brought in, and he was a bit sort of, he's got his own Instagram thing. He was a bit sort of, yeah, I spent the morning looking at all your reports, and a morning for him, that's a lot of money that's been spent on me for a start. You've been through it, haven't you? So, yeah, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to try this, and it might sound odd, but the fact that he was excited about my case, that he'd taken it seriously, and he was going, I've never done it before, but don't worry, I do something I've never done every time because I do the difficult stuff. That actually helped me go, yeah, all right, this is kind of cool. I'm gonna find it interesting, and then for me, I love the detail. So I was like, okay, right. I went back to the hospital a few days before the surgery, so I knew the layout of the hospital. What can I make different from previous time? Well, now I can have visitors, so I say people can visit me because all the other surgery was in lockdown. I knew that what's most annoying during recovery is everyone else, so I got myself some decent noise cancelling headphones. Um, and my wife got some nice sort of smelly things to smell because everything feels a bit chemically. So for that, for that, which was quite a big thing, it took a while, and then it took a few people like the plastic surgeon to actually change your perspective. But on the day-to-day stuff, um, it's given myself the reality that for sometimes I do need to rest, but actually almost framing it. So like last year, I was rubbish at work after lunch. I would end up just sort of not really getting back into it. And it was like, you're allowed a bit of an extra rest, but make that rest 45 minutes. Don't make it more than that. It was a few little tools and techniques that the counsellor highlighted that I've now got of like, okay, well, I'll try that. It was the fact that I'd blurred my cancer time with my well-being time, and she pointed out they're two entirely separate things. Going for treatment and getting hooked up for drugs is not a time off. It's not actually, it is medication time. And so if you've got like a bit of a pie chart of your of life, that's not actually you enjoying some well-being. You've now got this big chunk that many people don't have, which is drugs well, drugs time or treatment time. And I had to also remind my wife and my family of that. It's like this, I might be going on and pretending that this is fun, but it really isn't. And so it was some of that stuff is just techniques, and it doesn't always work, but I just keep on trying them. It's also realizing what's bad technique. So for me, after surgery, I've been listening to a lot more interesting, engaging audio books, and I've kind of kept myself off the trashy, addictive content that's probably not helping my brain much. And it is sort of that kind of techniques that help. And one of the things I probably did too much was, I said like cancer's not going to define us, the post-it note. I made it for a period of time to my family. I made my armor too big, that I made it feel like it was nothing. It was, and I realized that they and my wife had never gone to where I go every fortnight. And things had opened up, and so actually that afternoon when we got the kids to speak to a child counsellor, I also, because I knew the people well enough, I went upstairs to treatment. And I spoke to receptionist. I've never taken my wife here, and when I had my first treatment, it was lockdown, so no one was allowed in with me. Can I show her what? Oh yeah, of course, Matt, of course. So I actually realised that I'd made it too small a thing, that I'd almost become flippant about it, and so therefore, when I was in the next day after treatment, and I'm like, I really, my head's full of steroids, or my mood can change because of things that I think maybe even my wife had kind of forgotten that there's a reason, that I'm not trying to be a rubbish husband. There is this stuff that happens. So it is always a balance, and I don't think I get it right all the time, and I don't get it right on the work or on the purpose side of things. The kids are really good at centering you in time, and I think that's a real benefit that we have, that probably older people, where their whole life can be consumed by a health incident. They're not filling their night. You've got to be needed in life. You've got to have purpose, and that really helps make you a driver. And I think the final other thing that from your everyone's comments was, during that emergency surgery bit, the one thing that sort of has always stuck with me is when I was sort of, after they'd told me they were going to operate on me the next day and they were going to do this and all this kind of side of stuff. And at that time, I'd had what's called an NG tube up my nose, and they'd drained everything out. I was kind of sat, well, laying on the bed, and I was like, what can I do? My brain's like, I'm trying to solve this. And what can I do? How can I tackle all this, assuming it is going to be cancer, blah, blah, blah. How can I contribute positively to this outcome? I can't make the surgeons better. I can't do their job. I've got to trust as well. So I've got to push. I've got to ask them questions. I've got to be a bit noisy and all that kind of stuff. But I've also, at some point, I'm not a specialist in any of this stuff. But what I can be is the best patient, and the word patient, part of that is actually, sometimes you've just got to wait. You've got to be calm about things. You've got to actually approach things in a way of like, part of it's also about acceptance. But there was other things that what I can do is mindset. And that's about choices, about where you send your mind, but it's also about where you don't. So I've accepted that this has happened. I've accepted that this may mean that my life is different to others, and it may mean that it's shorter. But I haven't then bothered to explore the why did it all happen to me? because that is just going down into a dark, dark area. And if you start looking to blame yourself, the occasional pizza takeaway or the processed food or the environment, there many of which could be reasons. But I wasn't an unhealthy individual anyway. It's not helpful, and it doesn't help the outcome if you start reflecting so much on the why, because ultimately with one in two you could turn that around to why not, and actually the other week my daughter, who's now obviously a bit smarter, and she, why did this happen to you, daddy? And I did say, to many extents, why not? And she said, when's it gonna go, daddy? And for me, one of my aims is long term. So when I look at the data, when I have that forum, and I would always recommend is, you can't know everything, but what we can have is you can have groups that are within you. There's a whole lot of group knowledge. So ask and lean on like forums, like for me, stage 4 bowel cancer, because you can post a question and there's people that have done loads of research, and then you can put that to your oncologist. The thing for me was actually where things get complicated is where there's too much interference. So if you have too much surgery, there's higher risk of sepsis, of complications, of all these other things. So it's like, I've got to get this path as long as possible, because I think that from where it started until about 10 years, if I get to 10 years, there will be a longer term solution. And where I got surgery the other month, Imperial, they're already doing trials for an mRNA vaccine for bowel cancer. That, and my wife was 5 years. I was like, no, things take longer for it actually to finally come out. So I said to him, I said, well, I think we might have some answers, in maybe 4 to 5, 5 to 6 years. And she's like, oh, so when I'm 13 or 14, I was like, that'll be a goal. For me, it'll be 5 years this September, and that's, and everyone, all the medical people go, you're sort of like, they're experimenting with me, they're treating me as a bit of a guinea pig, and I have encouraged them to do that, to be honest. But yeah, anyway, that's just a few little point responses for what everyone else commented on. Cool.
Thank you. We touched on, talking to the children as well, which is always difficult. And if anyone does need any help or support with talking to children, we do have material that we can help with. But I wondered how you approach the subject, or how you went around telling the children. I know you said that you talk about it honestly, but that first step must be very difficult, and that decision whether or not to tell them. So I mean, I feel like I made a mistake I told my children. They were a little bit older, but I took full control of it, like you were saying earlier about, that's fine, I can deal with this. And that's what I did with mine. It was like, you carry on doing what you're doing. Mum's just gonna deal with this cancer. And so I made it smaller than what it actually was. So because I went into protect mode. But really what I realized I'd done was shut them off completely to be able to come to me with any questions, because I was like, no, it's fine. Mum's going to deal with it and it's all going to be okay, even though I didn't know that. So I was lying to them in the first instance, and then not really giving them the opportunity to ask questions about what's going to happen, how will treatment affect you, and things like that. So how did you deal with that?
I mean, differently at different stages because of the time that's gone on, and lockdown. We were all in the house together. The room I'm in now. So after they knew that Daddy had surgery, they when I was in the hospital for a reasonable amount of time to recover, because obviously unbeknownst to me, I'd been losing weight and all that kind of stuff. And although they weren't able to visit, I had a window, luckily enough, and it was near the car park, so they could wave at me. We told them that I had surgery. We did use the word cancer. They were 2 and 4 at the time, so there's not, there's daddy's had an operation. He's recovering. He now has to have this treatment. Um, Funnily enough, now they don't even remember that I lost all my hair and all this kind of side of stuff during traditional chemotherapy. And then there's a photo of Alex with me, and he's like, "Oh, look at you! You look all different." And I, it's difficult to remember exactly how we framed it, doing all those steps. And I mean, it tended to be. I don't think we always use the real words. I mean, I talked about the power of words, and you can make you can take the power away from the word by owning it, right? And actually, I was still on the slab being operated on when the main surgeon phoned my wife and said the word cancer, and he, obviously having experience, knew what he was looking at, and he got her to say the word, and I was still being sewn up at that time because language has so much power. They, as young kids now, they're totally cool with it. I mean, they use that word more than most of their friends, which I think friends' parents find a bit awkward, but they're kind of like, because actually for their generation, cancer's going to be like asthma, or it's going to be a chronic disease that's manageable. That's the future. That's where treatment will head. So it will no longer be the death knell for their generation. But I think throughout the journey, I've probably given them more detail that they've been able to really understand. But we've got like one of those Dorling Kindersley illustrated books, and we go, "This is what's happening." So here's they're interested in biology a bit because we go, "Here's the large intestine. Daddy hasn't got much of that left." you know, you know, and then there's even in that book explaining what like a cancer cell, and we talk about that's where like you grow hair and skin and nails, and sometimes your body gets things wrong, and that's what it is. So we've kind of tried to always use that sort of open, clear, direct language, and to be honest, they've always, like I said, almost then go, "All right, okay, all right, come put the TV on," so I do hope that because of the length of time, it's fairly routine. This surgery wasn't, and I think that's affected them. And they like Alex wants to play football with me, but he knows he's got to be really careful because my core's very sensitive at the moment, and my muscles haven't connected up. So he's a little bit, yeah, he's quite overprotective of daddy. So like when he's worried about the bad guys, and I go, there ain't no bad guys. They're not going to come into our house. He's like, "No, I'll protect you, daddy." And it's like, it's all right. I can do stuff, but they're celebrating with me. Like, "Wow, daddy lifted me up." The other day, I lifted Emma up in a hug, and she's like, "Oh, he's better."
Oh,
So full transparency
yeah.
and giving them the information, using real words, and then responding to how they respond, really, of like the questions that they ask, and do you want to know more, or do you want to know, and going to see that place, and the fact that they can speak to this person, and they're like, "Oh, can we speak to them about anything?" It's like, yeah. That's all hopefully made them quite open to stuff, and realizing that loads of people are going through random stuff, and to not judge the person that down the road, you don't know what's going on in people's lives.
Yeah, it teaches. And then on the flip side of talking to children as younger people, if we have our parents still, we have our parents that we need to navigate conversations with, which can also be really tricky. And yeah, I wonder how that was.
That is still a challenge. I would say some of my mum's mental health is probably created by myself. I don't think lockdown helped many elderly people in their personal confidence. But for her, especially when I talked about acceptance, I don't think she's got there.
No.
And I think it's, very difficult for a mum, whose son is still her son, no matter what age I am. Before the surgery, and I went and saw them and explained what we're going to do. And they were like, oh, it's back again and all that kind of stuff. I said, it never went. As much as for years the scans weren't showing anything, the reality is that their technology doesn't yet exist to show that it's a complete response. And because of my cancer profile, they weren't ever going to take me off these drugs. You know, and it's like, oh, so when I was explaining that, it was almost like I was explaining it for the first time, and I was like, you know this, I've told you this again and again. And so I don't think our parents, yeah, they don't always know how best to respond.
No.
How I just want them to be good grandparents for my kids, and yeah, yeah, support me and give me a hug and stuff like that. But it's really difficult for them, and I think especially for my mum, and especially I think she still goes back to the why has it happened, why you, and whilst I've said it to my kids again, and I think they've probably listened more, I think the older you get, the less pliable your brain is,
Yeah.
and the more you tell your brain, oh, I'm just a worrier, the more your brain says, yeah, you're just a worrier. And for me, it's like, stop wasting your time worrying. You know, it doesn't really achieve anything. It doesn't help me resolve, make my drugs work better. But even with optimism, it has to be conditional optimism. It has to be optimism with the understanding that you've also got to do stuff. You can't just be blind. I can't just be some sort of sort of optimism, and just got of me being constantly jolly about everything. I've got to know that I've got to do stuff. I've got to push people. I've got to challenge. But yeah, parents, I haven't sorted them out.
I
Definitely not.
think it's hard to manage their expectations of what you should be doing, and then it's also hard to explain to them and get them to understand how you want things to be, and for them to respect that, because like you say, you're their baby, and so they just want everything to go right, but it's hard to sit down and have that conversation with them about, this is my journey, this is how I want it to be, I need you to, and I think that's probably quite hard for our generation to not only look at, navigate how our children are around our cancer, but also our parents as well.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
Yeah, and I mean, you're absolutely right. And as an example, like we've got a bit of a group chat where I've also got like my sisters and my sisters' husbands, and when I was like sharing, like, yep, so I'm going for this surgery. This is what it's looking like. Blah 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 blah. My couple of my sisters' husband, like both of their husbands were like going, "You go, Matt," and like doing fist pumps and like, "You've got this," and that was kind of what I needed. That was like, yeah, yeah, it's you've done, you're right. And then my folks, their response was, we don't know what to say. We're in tears and darkness at home and all that kind of stuff. I was like, yeah, you might be, but I don't want to hear that. You
No.
know? I mean, I'm the one having this blooming stuff done to me in like a week's time. So, you know, and
It's-
then we ended up having like a split conversation with my two sisters going, "Cuh, parents, eh?"
yeah, yeah, they're hard work, aren't they?
But I mean, it's terrible for them as well.
It is.
Absolutely, yeah,
Yeah.
that, like you say, that I'm still their son, and I, I talk as a parent where it's happened to me. But I mean, at some of the charity events I go to, and things like Rocking Horse and stuff like that, when you hear stories from about it, the idea of the kids upstairs asleep, yeah, and even when they are in their 30s and I'm still around, which would be awesome, that would still be.
Yeah.
I it's very tricky for them.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I think we often forget, our own parents, don't we, of, their feelings and thoughts, but it's also hard on us emotionally to manage their expectations and their worries and their fears. It can also be an extra stress on us. But yeah. Does anyone have any questions?
Don't have a question, Matt. Thank you very much for sharing everything. But I had my surgery like 2 months ago now, and from the surgeon, they were like, "Yeah, we got the all clear. We took everything out. We from the results, 8 out of the 22 lymph nodes had cancer, but everything else around it was clear." And I'm still like struggling with this feeling of like, you say the cancer's gone, and it's not. And now hearing you say that you had the same thing. And then it came back at a later stage again. It was like, just that's something, that's going on in my mind.
I mean, everyone's journey is different, but what I would share with you is that reality of like, it's not it's not that medical professionals are wrong. It's not that the advice that they're giving you is wrong, but they are blooming busy, and there is a need to be noisy. There is a need to change. Like I mentioned, like at the beginning when I first got my X-ray at the rubbish hospital that was somewhere near Bexhill that I won't mention. I didn't know that an X-ray only did really bones, and that we're looking at soft tissue and all this kind of stuff. Since then, I've had CT and MRI and PET-CT and various other scans. And there's a lot that you sometimes need to encourage, like of okay, what next? For me, they took out, they biopsied and sequenced, so that it meant that they actually looked at the profile of that cancer, and then that profile gave them information that said, okay, well, it is of this type, so we really need to treat it with this. And they chose to do, mop-up chemotherapy. And tomorrow I've got a baseline CT scan to be done. CT scans take no time at all, really. They're pretty straightforward, and they get reports where I am within 10 working days. So you do occasionally need to make a bit of noise and get people's emails and go, oh, am I going to get a follow-up scan and all those kind of things? But I can't, your particular scenario, it is like you are right to question. That's all I would say. And you are right to go, what about this? Or what's next? Because to make an assumption, like, a surgical team is different from the oncology, from the chemicals team, if you like. Often they work together and they have MDTs, multidisciplinary teams, and they all look at data. But you need to be an advocate for your own health. That's all I would say. Yeah, definitely.
Right, thanks.
Yes, Simon?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you mentioned, Matt, the colorectal nurse or Macmillan nurse, can't remember which, but or if it's the same thing. But I suppose maybe for Casper, I've had similar where there's a Macmillan nurse, the team of them at the hospital in Brighton, where it's been a few times where because you meet the oncologist, or you have a debrief from the surgeon, and then like 2 days later you're suddenly like, oh, they said this, what does that mean? Like, oh, really, that doesn't make sense, I don't really understand that. But then I've just managed to email them and say, oh, I've just got a question about this, what does that mean? And then they might give me a ring and say, oh, that means this. So I found that quite useful. So that could be something that could be worth doing if you haven't had that already. I don't know how you go about finding those people with
You're under Brighton as well, though, aren't you, Casper?
Yeah. So, but I haven't had an oncology team really speak to me yet. So my scenario is a bit different. I'm getting transferred from Ireland, I'm still kind of waiting to see what's going to happen. I'm going to get my chemo here, but I don't know when. I've not been reached out to yet. So I think, Matt, what you were saying about be a bit more pushy. I sent another email yesterday and I got confirmation that they've been in touch with the doctors, and I'm going to go in as well tomorrow and just like actually speak to someone and do stuff like that. But yeah, thanks, Simon. I'll see if I can find that nurse when I need her.
Yeah, for me, that individual, and I know because, like I said, I'm moderator on Bowel Cancer UK's forum, there is not every part of the UK has these, the consistency in response time on scan results, all that kind of stuff. But if you find one individual that can coordinate and nag other people, they are a blessing. And yeah, as soon as you get that person, for me, an email, being able to email that person, and then actually they then speak to the other person, knowing the place, like go to the hospital and walk. You're not, no one really bars you from a hospital really. So get to know the layout of the space, and you then start beginning to sort of like find out where people are and stuff like that. But yeah, there, I think that getting that transfer over and getting a bit of noise at the beginning is really important. Yeah.
Have you found that person, Simon? Have you managed to find somebody that, you've got a consistent?
Yeah, not necessarily consistent because there's a team of them. But I think I ring them rather than email. And then I'll leave a message, and then, someone different might ring back, but they've all been really helpful. Then I do email them as well, actually. So I haven't really got one person, but I found that whenever I've needed anything, I've got any questions, they always get back to me and are really helpful. So
Great. Are there any more questions from anyone? No. Well, I mean, if anyone has got any more questions, would it be okay for them to email you, Matt, or put an email through me and I can pass it on to you, however you would like to do that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll put your email up. I'll let everybody know, and if they've got any questions, to let you know. And then obviously, if there's any help you need with, talking to your children, we can help with that. We can help with well-being and movement. We can also help with any therapies. If you're struggling and you want to talk to somebody, reach out to us. We can help with all the things that Matt's been talking about, really. Like Justin said earlier, really what you've been saying completely echoes the ethos that we as Wolo would like to bring. So if there's any of those things that you're struggling with, please just reach out, and we will do our best to help you with those. Either email me or Justin or Marcus, or come through one of the WhatsApp groups. We're available to you. So anything that you need. So yeah, and thank you so much, Matt. Honestly, it's been invaluable hearing you, and I think maybe we might have to get you on again. I think there's probably a lot more that we could have talked about, and there's always things to learn. But you've covered so much this evening, and you've been through so much, and you are amazing. I know you're a human being, but you are amazing, and you have done really, really well. And it's very inspiring to hear how you've got to where you are now.
Well, no, thanks for having me. Like I said, I just hope that a couple of little gems there people then act upon or didn't know about. So yeah, always happy to talk and to share, really.
Thank you so much, and we'll share the recording with you all so that you can look back on it, because I'm sure there's probably things that you've may have forgotten. And thank you so much, everyone. Thanks for coming. It's been amazing. Cheers.
Matt,
Matt,
thanks.
thanks.
Thank
Take care. Bye.